This year will mark the 30-year anniversary of the Dayton Peace Agreement being signed, which ended the Bosnian War. For years, I lived with an immense internal fear that I had no idea was linked to the generational trauma and the deeply rooted Bosnian heritage that I carried. In today's video, I wanted to highlight my experience as an immigrant and as a person displaced of their home due to war, and how that shaped me into the person that I am today. Mental health has become a very important topic to me in the last several years, and especially this year as I got to know myself a lot more. And I wanted to continue talking about mental health and how it affects me, how it affects other people, and how we can all grow and learn from each experience that we're in. And being diaspora from Bosnia, I wanted to talk about that even more specifically. I think there's a lot of us here in the US that have experienced very similar things, and not a lot of us talk about it. And generational trauma from Bosnian diaspora is such a unique experience that tends to be shoved under the rug a lot and not talked about enough. And I wanted to share my experience for that reason with you today. So in this context, diaspora are a community of people who no longer live in their native land, but they still have very strong cultural and emotional ties to their native land. So like us Bosnians, if we no longer live there, but there's a lot of us in one place, we still love to eat our food, listen to our music, go to our parties, and connect to our people and have our communities. I want to acknowledge that some of the topics covered today may be a little heavy and triggering for some viewers, so I want to make sure that you take care of yourselves and proceed with caution if necessary. So generational trauma, in simple terms, is trauma that was passed on through generations, affecting people within the family who didn't actually experience a traumatic event that occurred. It can manifest in many different ways, such as through epigenetics, learned behavior, through coping mechanisms, and through cultural narratives. When you think about it though, doesn't it kind of suck to think about how someone in your past had something happen to them, whether it was because of war or someone in their family was not emotionally stable enough and therefore they treated them badly, and so they learned that behavior and passed it on to somebody else in their family, and then they passed that behavior on to somebody else in their family, and then they passed that behavior on to somebody else in their family, and then that behavior just kept getting passed on and passed on and passed on. Like, this is how generational trauma becomes a cycle, is if you don't stop it. This is one of the main reasons why I think it's important to talk about generational trauma, because I think the only way to stop it is to break the cycle. And the only way to break the cycle is to talk about it and to bring awareness to it. And to bring awareness to it is to talk about it. So, yeah, talking about it is important because we want to break the cycle of dysfunction. Before the war started, the country was all one called Yugoslavia before it broke up and is now a bunch of different little countries. The country I'm from now is called Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the village that I'm from is near a city called Teslić, which is in the Republic of Serbia in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's kind of messy due to the war. What I do remember, because I was very young when we left, but I do remember some things living in Bosnia. I think I was about 5 years old when we'd left. We lived on a piece of land that was our family's land. It was my grandfather's from my dad's side. It was a piece of land that belonged to our family. I don't know how many generations it was from. I know that there was a house on that property, and that house got torn down at some point, and then my dad helped build a house that is now sitting on that property, and then that was the house that he got to live in. I don't know how that whole thing works in Bosnia and how people choose who gets to stay where, but my dad got to live in the house that his family owned, and then he was one of 8 siblings, and they all kind of dispersed all throughout the village and the city and the country and the continent. I guess they're all kind of all over the place. Pre-war life was great from what I remember. My parents' relationship wasn't great. Our home life wasn't all that great, but I was 5, and what I remember was amazing. We had chickens, we had cows, we had a dog that would steal our shoes and our socks and hide them in the chicken coop. We had fresh milk that we did not drink raw. We would boil our milk and drink it safely. And it was a great life that we lived. I mean, we had a strawberry patch in the back of our house that my cousin and I would go and steal strawberries from. But again, I was 5 and I don't remember much, and I don't know how our life actually was. It's just my tiny little memories that I have. What I do know is that there was a lot of emotional strain in our household and a lot of emotional stress going on. So I know that that's a whole lot of can of worms that we're not going to get into right now, but that's part of the trauma. Because my dad was one of 8 siblings living on a farm, or living on a small farm in a little village in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, they unfortunately were not able to educate all of their kids, and so he was uneducated. And my mom also, unfortunately, was not able to get fully educated. My parents were very young and emotionally immature when they met, and were very young also when they had kids. And I don't think they were ready for that life when they started that life, unfortunately. As I don't think many people are when they do start a life like that together. And they were not able to navigate it very well together. They were not able to support each other very well, emotionally, physically, mentally. They did not have very healthy coping mechanisms with or without each other. They just had their own issues that they couldn't help each other with. Because they had their own stuff going on, were not able to help emotionally support myself and my brother, unfortunately, either. So while they were able to financially support us and be our safety and support system in many, many ways, they were not able to support us in a way that we really craved, I think, and needed at that time. It's all part of the generational trauma that my parents experienced, and therefore they were not able to provide that to me, which is part of my trauma. That's the cycle that we all lived through. I don't hold a grudge on my parents for a trauma I experienced, because it's something they experienced too. It wouldn't be fair for me to fault them for it. The war started in 1992, and I don't exactly remember or know how or when it started or where we were exactly when it all began. I know we were obviously in Bosnia, but all I remember is that one day my mom said is that we had to leave. We had to leave. It was her and me and my brother. My dad was already in Germany working as a guest worker. That was the thing back then. In Yugoslavia, a lot of the men were working as guest workers in other countries. My dad was working as a guest worker in Germany at the time, which was kind of lucky, because it was lucky and it wasn't lucky. It was lucky in the sense that it was kind of great because he was able to kind of maybe help us get out of this bad situation, hopefully. That's kind of what we had hoped for. But it was bad because it was just me. It was just my mom with us kids in like a really unsafe situation. So I don't know, she was probably really scared is what I'm assuming. Like, my mom and I have talked about this a few times, and it's really hard for me to kind of talk about it. I still get a little triggered by it. So but the times that we have talked about it, I can just imagine the fear that she was feeling. So she said that we had to go, and that she went to talk to someone about something, about leaving around like the village, somewhere around the village, and that they were like putting fences up around the village or something, or putting up some kind of guard things, and they were telling her like, you better take your kids and go, and that she just grabbed whatever she could get, and that she thought that she would be coming back, that she had no idea that this would be like the last time she's leaving, that she had actual hopes of like, oh, I'm just going to be leaving like for a couple of days and not be back. Like, she had no idea that was the last time she's going to be leaving her house, her livelihood, her home, like everything she had known. And then the parts about that story that scare, like that just kind of make me so sad to think about are like we had to actually escape. And I might get really sad talking about this, and if I do, I apologize in advance. Basically, it was groups of people walking together because it was like in community, you don't want to be alone. And you know, people were helping each other by offering each other water. People were already out of water at some point. And that we had to stop at a person's house like overnight to just overnight it because you had to sleep somewhere. Like you couldn't just keep walking all night. And my mom told me that like someone took my shoes and that I had to be without shoes or something. I don't remember, but and they wouldn't feed us. That we had to go hungry for a night. And I don't know, this probably doesn't sound like such a bad story because I know others went through far worse during the war, but that doesn't invalidate my experience. I was 5 and I had to go hungry for a night because people wanted a war. I don't even remember like the rest of the trip. I just remember being at that house, and then the rest of the trip was kind of just a walk. I kind of don't remember the rest of it. I remember a really smelly bus. Yes, I do remember a really smelly bus. It's coming back to me now. And then I remember, the only reason I remember it is because my mom told me a part of the story. We were on the bus in the mountain range, and that the bus driver asked all the adults to get off the bus and walk behind it because the mountain range was so narrow in case the bus got too heavy, so it wouldn't fall off the cliff, basically. I wasn't in Bosnia during the war, which I'm very fortunate to not have had to experience it in Bosnia. I lived through part of it living in Croatia and then in Germany. I know many people that lived in Bosnia during the war, and that is just so heartbreaking to me. The impact of the war was just sickening. They took over the entire city of Sarajevo. They call it ethnic cleansing, what happened in Bosnia. Ethnic cleansing. The term alone makes me, just makes me get goosebumps all over my body because it's so disgusting. Ethnic cleansing. They wanted to get rid of all the Muslim Bosniaks. Let that sink in for a moment. They wanted to get rid of all Bosnian Muslim people. Why? I don't understand why there's so much hate in people that they had to, and that was not the first time. That was not the first time that had happened. And let's look at what's happening right now in the world. Is it repeating itself? You tell me in the comments right now, what do you think is happening? Do you think it's similar? All I can do is empathize with the people that are going through it. And believe me, I do. My heart hurts for them, which is one of the reasons I had to make this video. I can't stand what's happening, and I feel for those people that are going through it right now. Millions of people were displaced during this war. Millions. Where are they now? Who knows? Lots of them are dead. I can tell you that. Thousands of men and boys during the Srebrenica massacre that occurred, a genocide that happened 30 years ago this month. Boys and men, over 8,000 boys and men, just gone like that. Can you imagine the psychological impact this had on a whole generation of women, girls, mothers, multiple generations probably, sisters, moms, cousins, like all of them. They all felt something when this happened. Generations of women who lost someone. That is generational trauma right there. Let's talk about it. So my grandparents stayed in Bosnia throughout the war, and Like I mentioned, my dad was a guest worker in Germany, and eventually my mom and my brother and I joined him there as well. We ended up losing our home to a Serbian family who decided to just take it and move in when we left. All of our possessions were eventually gone. I don't know what happened to our possessions. They were just not there anymore. Obviously, our way of life was completely destroyed. We had to learn a completely new way of life in Croatia, and then in Germany, and then in the US when we came here. And our sense of security was just completely destroyed again, multiple times. My biggest challenges faced during the war were being separated from all of my cousins, because to this day now, I know that I strive with people. I strive around people. And growing up, in my village, I was surrounded by my cousins. At least that's how I remember it being. Even if they didn't live around me, I feel like I was always around my cousins. And so when we had to leave either of the countries, whether it was Bosnia, because we had to leave to go to Croatia, or it was still all former Yugoslavia, but it's how it is current day. When we had to go to Croatia, or even when we had to go to Germany, I had to leave cousins in either of the places. And then in Germany, I had to leave a bunch of the new friends that I made. So anywhere I left, I had to leave connections that I made, and to me, that was always the hardest part. Our move to the US happened in 1998, and that was probably the hardest one, because I'd finally just gotten used to living in Germany at that point. And I was finally starting to gain some confidence and find my way there. And I don't know, I was 12 or I was 11. I was like a preteen. I felt like I was finally fitting in and somewhere and finding a group of friends that I liked. And then I had to come here, and then I was like an awkward preteen here. And that was the roughest transition, because not only did I have a language barrier, I had an accent. I was bigger than average. I was taller and heavier. I had a bit of a cultural shock, and we were rebuilding from scratch. Like, we had nothing. We were financially unstable. We were, we lived in an apartment. We were not cool. I didn't have the cool clothes, cool stuff. I didn't have anything. So I was just the odd one out. Didn't feel cool. Not that I had to be cool. I just, didn't feel like I fit in. I was not it. You know what I mean? That added to my trauma. Let's just put it how it is. It added to my trauma because I was different. And being different when you're 11 isn't always the best. You want to fit in when you're 11. You want to be seen as one of the crowd. You want to be the same as everyone else. You don't want to be seen as different. And when you are, oh man, you get made fun of. Real bad. And when you get made fun of, you get more anxiety and fear that builds up inside you. And then that manifests in different ways. I can tell you how my generational trauma manifested in me. That's the next portion of this video. Some of the emotional and psychological impacts that generational trauma has on me are anxiety and fear, having major anxieties over things that don't matter in this present moment in time, like all the time, until most recently. Like, I feel like these are issues I've had, but I've been working on controlling and managing them more lately. So these are things I have dealt with, but not currently dealing with necessarily. Depression and sadness. So just having this impeding feeling of doom and sadness, and maybe not even something that I've experienced necessarily, but just this unending feeling of like, oh my gosh, I just can't go on. It's terrible. Trust issues, like not being able to trust authoritative figures in life, or just the world at large, not being able to trust people or anyone in general, or dogs. There was a time in my life where I didn't trust people to the point that I didn't trust their dogs. I was afraid of dogs because I was afraid of people. Yeah. That's how far my deep-rooted fears went. Yeah. Hypervigilance. I was so afraid and so on edge. I was so hypervigilant that I was always on edge and scanning for threats, and I had a really hard time relaxing. There was no way I was able to sit down and just be. There was always something going on in my head, and I was always had to be doing something. And now I'm able to actually just relax and be. But that is all part of the generational trauma and the response that I had. And I had a really, really difficult time with attachment in relationships. I had a fear of abandonment and being left alone. I would push people away, and I had really unhealthy attachment patterns. Sometimes I still struggle with this depending on the person, but I'm learning coping mechanisms, and I'm learning things about myself every day that help me with this and the patterns that I'm catching myself in. And I've struggled with identity confusion because I feel like with Diaspora, it's so easy to feel caught between the two cultures. Like, it's hard to feel fully connected to one or the other. So definitely sometimes feel in a bit of an identity crisis. Like, am I Bosnian? Am I American? Am I Bosnian American? Am I both? Am I one or the other? I don't know. But sometimes there's a struggle with that as well. Then there's also some behavioral patterns that I've noticed, like coping mechanisms. My family coped with overworking and avoiding. They worked a lot to the point that they were not home a lot. In my last video, I mentioned my parents worked either multiple jobs or, they were just always working. They always worked multiple jobs and were never home because they were working to provide for us. So they were either working or avoiding us for the most part. And so I found myself mirroring those behaviors or those coping mechanisms for a long time, up until earlier this year when I left my career that I was working on building for almost 20 years. I think that overworking and avoiding what I truly value, I think that was me mirroring these behaviors. Specific communication style that my family used to communicate about emotions, specifically when I was growing up, was to not. We would totally avoid them. So yeah, I did that for a really long time too. Yeah, and that didn't really work out for me that well. So I'm learning. Sorry for the sarcasm, I can't help it. But yeah, I'm learning every single day, and I'm getting so much better about expressing my emotions and talking about what I really, really, truly feel. And I think that there's no other way. You really have to. You have to be true to who you are and what you want and what you need, because I've avoided for too long, and I've internalized that avoidance for too long, and it has gotten me nowhere. It's only gotten me heartbreak and pain and sorrow and sadness. And guess what? None of those are helpful to lead a healthy and happy life. So doing the opposite should work. Just kidding. Doing the extremes is never good. So just find a good balance, find a good middle ground. Open communication is great, and being open with your emotions and your needs and desires is the best thing you can do for yourself. I have also dealt, and still sometimes deal, as I mentioned in my last video, with some financial anxieties and a little bit of a scarcity mindset, especially since leaving my career that I had worked so hard on building. While we are somewhat financially stable currently, I still struggle with that because I grew up in a deep-seated fear of scarcity and loss. We grew up in Bosnia and literally lived on a piece of land where my mom, grew her own vegetables and fruit for the most part and would only have to buy necessities here and there. And my dad was working, but all the money he would make, unfortunately, we wouldn't see a lot of that money because he had, how do I say this nicely? He would spend it on stuff. Let's just say it like that. And he wouldn't bring a lot of it home, unfortunately, for us. So we had to be resourceful, I guess. And so we grew up with not a lot. And so when we lived in Germany, my mom had a job, and again, we didn't have a lot. Then we came here. My parents worked all the time, but we also had bills to pay, and we had to pay for our apartment and all this stuff. And things were expensive for us. Maybe not for everyone, but for us, because my parents worked manufacturing jobs. They worked all the time. We didn't have a lot. We started literally with nothing. We had this much when we came to America. Zilch, nada, nothing. So, and on top of that, we had to pay back money. Like, we came here and then we had to pay back the money for the tickets that they paid the refugee. We had to pay the immigration company the money that they paid for us to come here. I don't know. Anywho, so we were in debt before we even came to America. Please, you don't come here for free. So anyway, yeah, so financial anxiety has like been a thing in my life since before I was born. It was like instilled in me to have financial insecurity. So I still have that to this day. And another behavioral pattern that I've struggled with is people pleasing and over responsibility and a sense of needing to take care of everyone or prevent conflict. I don't do that anymore. I feel like I've learned to really let go and not people please as much as I can. While it's hard, I've really tried to prioritize myself and my needs first. But it's hard, but I try. I've also experienced some really strong physical manifestations that I like to talk about, like chronic stress symptoms that I sometimes still experience, like fatigue and headaches. But a couple of years ago, I had some major stomach issues that were happening that actually started happening on the first day of my promotion at my last job. And that's ironic, actually. They started on the first day of my promotion, and I just started getting sick, like violently ill, vomiting. And it started happening that day, and then every month, it started happening once a month, every month. And it would last a couple of days, and then it would be like this violent illness that would last for a couple of days. And after those couple of days would be over, it would take me a couple of days to come back to health and be like fully back up to like normal and moving up again and like getting back to it. And I think I lost like 30 pounds in a matter of like 2 months. And people were like, oh my God, you look so great. And I'm like, oh, great, thanks. I feel like shit. But nobody knew I was sick, and I didn't really know I was sick either. But now I know, thinking back and reflecting on that time, that was stress and anxiety. My body was just manifesting chronic stress symptoms. And it makes me so sad that I had no idea how to take care of myself then. Had I known then what I know now, I would have taken care of myself way differently. But it's okay. I think the first step in healing generational trauma is to acknowledge it and to recognize it and to name it. Also, researching and learning about Bosnia, the history, and about generational trauma in general has really helped me understand a lot more about the topic and about myself. My favorite way to learn more about this has been talking to family. Talking to my mom, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins. Talking to a lot of different people within my family has been very healing in a sense, because everyone's experience within our family has been different, but also their experience surrounding the war has been a lot different too, and their role that they played, not only in my life, but just their own lives and how they experienced the war and that time of the war has been different. So that's been my favorite part, because I love connecting with others, and I hope to one day be able to invite some of them on my channel at some point and maybe interview some of them. I think that would be the coolest thing. Maybe some friends too, hint hint, nudge nudge. I'm hoping to bring some of them on and hopefully talk to them in the future about some of their experiences as well. I think that would be fantastic. I do want to highlight the importance of talking to a professional about trauma, generational trauma, any kind of trauma in general, because I don't think that I would have been able to get out of the deep, dark sadness I was feeling if I didn't have professional support. Specifically, if I didn't have my mental health support program that I attended this year, because that's what really helped me the most. Within that program, I was able to experience memory reconsolidation therapy, or MRT for short. And while I've tried EMDR, which is another therapy modality, MRT was probably one of my favorite ways to do therapy, and it was a one-time, one-and-done type of thing, and I've never felt such relief until I've done MRT. Like, it took a while to process things after that therapy session was over, but once I've been able to kind of live life after that session and just process things as they come up, it's been a life-changing experience, and I would recommend it to anyone. Mindfulness, meditation, journaling, creative expression, this is it for me right here. I love making these videos and connecting with you guys and talking with others about their mental health, their journeys, and what they're up to lately. And building a strong support system are so important to me. Self-care and coping strategies are so important to me. So I definitely try to do what I can every single day, including journaling, reading, mindfulness, connecting with my cultural heritage, in whatever way that means, whether it's just talking to my family, music, food, and by building a strong support system. The ways that I'm reclaiming my narrative is by not allowing my past to write my future. I'm not allowing my past trauma to continue writing my story for me. I'm not going to allow the trauma that was caused to my family or by my family to me. So this is really hard for me to talk about, and I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up in this video, but it's part of my generational trauma and part of why I have to make this video. So unfortunately, my dad didn't make it. He lived with a lot of trauma, I think, and a lot of generational trauma. Like I mentioned before, he unfortunately didn't have an education. He had a lot of siblings, and his parents passed away when my brother was, I think, was he born yet? I think my brother had just been born. And we had came to the United States in 1998, and he had just ripped a ligament in his ankle right before we moved here in Germany. And he didn't have the surgery there because we had the tickets to come here. Like, we had our plane tickets and everything ready and set to come here. But he tore the ligament in his leg, and he's like, nope, I'm not getting the surgery. We're coming here. We have everything set. So he lived with that pain and his tore ligament for years and years and years and years and years. So that's like a physical trauma on his body, right? And I would think I was I don't remember, maybe I was I was a senior. He got it fixed. He got a surgery to get it fixed. And I was at college, duh. He had a surgery to get it fixed. And he was supposed to go back to work on a Monday, I remember. And he was on a leave of absence from work for 3 months and all the things, and he was healing and everything. And on that Friday that he was home, that final Friday, I don't really want to say what he did or what happened, but it was not a natural way to leave the earth. I will just say that. And that's trauma for the rest of us. That hopefully will not remain in a generational cycle for my kids, because I plan on nurturing them and giving them safety and love and all the emotional support that they require and need from me. And wow, it feels really good to talk about it openly and not feel like I need to cry, actually. That's good. I feel strong, wow. But that's one of the ways that I'm working on breaking the cycle for a healthier future for me and my family. It's by talking about it. My husband and I have already had so many healthy conversations with our kids, and they're only 6 and 8. But I mean, healthy to a degree that they understand about mental health and other things that are important to us to talk about to them about now at this point in their lives. I just hope that they know that they're always going to be safe and loved with us no matter what. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today and listen to my story about generational trauma and being in Bosnian diaspora, living in America, and about some of my family's past and living in Bosnia. I hope that you will share some of your own experiences down in the comments. I love talking to you guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for being here today. Until next time, bye.